Hey guys, welcome. Sorry we're a bit late. We've just got so much stuff to organise here, but we are live now and happy to be here. So, another episode of Let's Talk About Ice. I love episode 4 it is. Loving Thursday nights. As promised, I've got Mr. George Patriki here on the couch, who's going to share with us a whole bunch of stuff. He's a book of knowledge, like I've said so many times. Really a guru when it comes to addiction and recovery and all this stuff. Hey, you are, man. You know it all. So hopefully we can share with you guys some insights about what George does, the services he provides at Optimal Health Group. But first, a couple of things. One thing that springs to mind is the Essendon Footy Club. Double thumbs up. That's just what an awesome thing for the boys to be involved. If you haven't seen, you're on Facebook now, so check out the videos that the Bombers did for AAIC, encouraging everyone to join the army. Really, really cool to see them on board. And while I'm at it, if you're a celebrity or if you know any sporting stars or anyone with a voice in the community, hit them up, see if they would like to do a short video and show their support for AAIC and join the army. Guys, the army is a way that the community can help AAIC with their cause and their campaign. Really, at the core of this campaign is an educational program. We're really passionate about educating the kids, and it works out to be about $2 a child. So through the army, you can make one-time donations, or you can become a monthly sponsor. Whatever suits you. We're looking for corporate sponsors as well. There's lots of ways you can be involved. Volunteers also. We're always looking for volunteers, guys. So if you would like to be involved, come and check it out. So George created and runs the Optimal Health Group, which trains people, training and development in social services and welfare services. So people that are looking to be involved in that industry or looking to develop further in those industries, they come to you, yeah? George, I'd like to get to the nitty-gritty stuff first, man. How did it all come about, man? Like, how did it all start for you? Why are you involved? You're a passionate man, and I know that, so how did it all come about?
Well, the passion comes from my history, and I guess many of our people involved as volunteers and workers with AAC and other organisations we're connected with that had a history of substance abuse. I spent 7 years in the drug scene, and after about 10 years of working through my issues, I had a real heart to go back and began my training and involvement with a range of organisations. And so the last 24 years I've been a therapist, and over those 24 years as a therapist, I've also been involved in training organisations and individuals who want to either upskill or receive a foundation in drug and alcohol and mental health. So my focus has been dual diagnosis, which is drug and alcohol and mental health issues at the same time. So that's been a long journey in looking at all the different areas that impact a person's health.
Sure.
So learning about what happens to a person's mind, their body, the spiritual framework that needs to be in place for a person to recover. All of those different angles and perspectives need to be in the recovery process. Sure. It gives you a bit of an idea of the framework that I work with. Sure. It's called an integrated holistic framework. In other words, we work with the body, soul and spirit, because each of those dynamics are involved in the problem, therefore they need to be there in the solution. So the training that I provide people is to understand how to bring together all of those different disciplines of science, which includes, of course, psychology and neuroscience and sociology, philosophy, spirituality. They all are interconnected.
Sure. Yeah, I did the dual diagnosis course, and if you cram so much into those few days. So, mate, I want to talk specifically about ice for a minute. In that 24 years that you've been involved, what's your experience of this drug? Like the increase of it, how does it differ from the opiates? How does it, what's your experience of that drug in the world now?
Each drug has its concerns and problems and risks. So it's really important that we can be very clear with the facts, which is what the Australian Anti-ICE campaign is specialising in, is presenting those facts in a way that people can understand, which is of course high school students. So using ex-users gives us the best of both worlds. So we have people that have come out of the drug scene, spend time getting clean, who get the dual diagnosis training as well as in-house training with the Australian Anti-ICE campaign, and bring those two strengths together before students so that they get evidence-based best practice in terms of skills, but they also have rapport building through their experience where it gives young people an element of respect and connection. And connection is really important because that's how we best deliver training. So why is ICE unique? Because of the purity that we've seen over the last few years. So in the 19th century, when methamphetamine was first developed, it was unheard of course, and it was a much more pure form of amphetamine, and it probably didn't even hit the Second World War until the late 40s. So by the time it hit the streets in the 60s and the 70s, it was almost an unknown drug. By the time we started hearing about it in the late 70s, we actually called it crystal in those days, and it was still only probably sitting at around about maybe 10% purity, which was still quite strong in comparison to the speed that we were getting. And it was a slow climb from about roughly 10% in the 70s to about 17% in 2013. So it took about 30 years before we saw a 17% purity content. But all hell broke loose in 2013. So as you know, the biker gangs started getting disbanded and breaking down their production, it opened up a vacuum. So Slovakia and countries from overseas started laughing at the 17% that we were used to here. They said, oh, we'll give you 30%. Then this big production war started, 40, 50, 60, 70. Now it's sitting at around about 77 to 80%. But what that means in English is that the impact on the human body is so much more dramatic in terms of what we're seeing with risks and consequences. So there was already problems with amphetamines in the days that I was using, but they are now multiplied because of the purity. So we've got a double bonus going on here.
Sure. So specifically, what does ICE attack? Like, how does it affect the physical body? What are the main sort of results for the kids out there who might come across a drug? What does it do to the physical body?
Well, this is why education is so important, because we've got actually two separate problems. One of the fillers that they use, which is what they actually cut all drugs with, and over here is the actual drug itself. There are separate issues. So probably a quick commercial break. We should really start with the fillers first, because people kind of need to know what's in those. Because they don't just use glucose; they use talcum powder, bicarbonate soda, Epsom salts, whatever shit white stuff they got lying around. We can say shit on the because that's what it is.
Because it is.
and also they use glass fillers, and a lot of people aren't even aware of that. Even when I was in the days that I was injecting, we didn't even hear of the glass fillers. In fact, it wasn't until I started working in Supreme Court cases that manufacturers would tell me, yeah, of course we put in glass fillers because it cuts the stomach linings in the brain vascular system, it makes the drug absorb faster. And I freaked out when I started hearing this. This is what I was putting in my arms.
Yeah.
So that's the fillers. Let's say we're talking about an 80% purity case. So 20% is that rubbish that I just outlined. But what about the 80% pure? This is what really is a worry, because as soon as the word pure is mentioned, what does a kid think of? Safe. A pure product is therefore safe, or it's a better product. But what we need to explain, and this is why the education is so important from AOC, is we have a very clear outline of the actual ingredients in the 80% purity. And it's lethal stuff. It's stuff you may have shared before, things like acetone,
lithium
from nail polish removal, lithium from batteries, toluene from brake fluid, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid. Fantastic for the skin and the hair, by the way. It's beautiful for the organs. It really washes the organs clean. I mean, I've been facetious here, but this is the sort of stuff that people need to know. They need to know the truth. And that stuff can cause not only permanent organ damage, but severe brain damage. And probably that's the one that we really need to highlight very clearly, because all drugs can harm the brain. Now, the outside of the brain, which is what we call in the techno world the cortex, is where all the high school areas are. Things like retaining information, learning new skills, remembering things, and all of those critical functions are from the cortex. Now, drugs are notorious for damaging the outside of the brain, and Dr. Daniel Amen, for example, who's a famous psychiatrist, he educates doctors and psychiatrists around the dangers of not only substance abuse but also sporting practices like gridiron and rugby. So he warns that the brain actually gets injured through violent, aggressive sports but also substance abuse. Now this is important because if we're damaging the brain, what happens to a young person's opportunities for learning? Apprenticeships, schooling, vocational opportunities, they are impacted. So in other words, a person's future is actually impacted.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, it's sad, and that's why I always say that I feel it's a disservice if we send our kids out into the world without education specifically about this drug, because it is so readily available. It's sad that so much human potential is being lost to this drug. George, there's so much I want to ask. Specifically,
Fire away, brother.
let's go. Let's do this. The cause of addiction, man. Can you outline some of the main causes why people fall into the trap of addiction?
Well, there are separate issues here. Whatever a drug will do inside the brain, a drug actually mimics and pretends to be the chemistry that we naturally make. Otherwise, a drug wouldn't even work.
Okay.
So if that chemical is pretending to be our chemicals, of course the brain is going to get used to it. When it gets used to it, it's going to want it. And when it doesn't get it, we go through withdrawal symptoms. So a drug can be physically addictive, but even more notorious is when it becomes emotionally and psychologically addictive. So there are two separate issues. Unfortunately, for people who stumble across methamphetamine, which is ice, they're going to cop a double bonus. They're going to cop an intensity from both sides. The physical intense experience is a huge lie and a deception. So unfortunately, people are deceived. They are lied to, thinking they're going to get this rush all the time when they're using this product. It's a lie. They might get it the first few times, then they get hooked on this experience that they chase, this illusion, this fantasy. So, of course, the more they use this product, the more they physically become addicted and emotionally, psychologically, chasing a rush that they're never going to get again.
They'll never get it again, no.
Because the brain gets damaged. The actual equipment, the machinery inside the melon actually gets damaged. And this is what we must communicate. So if you're watching this now and you know people that are using, really we need to explain to you why this is so dangerous, because you actually damage three parts of the machinery in the melon. First are the factories that actually make the brain chemicals that we call vesicles. Now, if they get damaged, then the production itself is diminished. Then the receptors, which is the other brain cell over here that receives it, they begin to withdraw and retract, and they don't no longer perform well. And the worst of all is the transporting pump that recycles the chemicals. That's supposed to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That actually gets smashed. So the actual mechanism that recycles the chemicals we make, if that gets damaged, we can no longer sustain this factory, this production line. A person is then permanently left lethargic, unmotivated. Their whole way they function and feel is diminished. What happens with this person? What happens when they stop?
Yeah.
It could take anywhere from 6 months to 3 years to get that machinery fixed if they're doing optimal health, which is a little commercial break.
Yeah.
Which is why we actually teach optimal health in our training, which is why we teach our staff and our volunteers the principles of optimal health. So we go beyond the minimum standard to optimal health up here, because it actually speeds up the recovery process.
Mate, while you're in all that, tell us about the dopamine. Tell us about the effects on the brain, how ice actually gives the person a rush. Can you tell us more about the dopamine side of things? Yeah,
well, that gives you a little bit of an understanding as to why the brain actually gets hijacked in the first place. Because we make many chemicals for our moods. The three most popular ones that you'll probably hear about is dopamine, serotonin and noradrenaline, but of course there are many, acetylcholine, GABA and all the rest of it. But the primary ones that provide pleasure particularly is dopamine. Now anything that's good for us will give us a dopamine experience, and the brain knows to repeat that. Food and sex and work and a coffee at the beach. If it's a good coffee in Melbourne, I'm not sure about the Gold Coast, but if you're getting a good coffee at a cafe with a friend, okay, those experiences are pleasurable, and the brain makes another chemical called glutamate to say, keep doing this, this is good for you. Unfortunately, when a person stumbles across the methamphetamine ice, the intensity is so unnaturally high, it's a lie and a delusion, and the brain, unfortunately, is an economist. It works efficiently. So what does the brain do? The brain says, well, why am I wasting my time with all these level 1 activities, the normal things of life, when I can go straight to a level 10? Being an economist, the brain says, I'm not wasting my time with level 1, I'm focusing straight on the level 10. Immediately, the brain is convinced to focus on the level 10, a person then becomes addicted.
Yeah.
That's the physical mechanism of addiction, which we call the reward pathway being attacked. Or hijacked is probably a better word. It's actually hijacking, really.
And so after excessive use, is it true the brain stops creating the dopamine and the receptors?
Well, it's those three things working at the same time. The factory, the production is diminished.
Yep.
We're actually losing the amount of chemicals we make, including dopamine, but others too, serotonin and noradrenaline and so forth. Then the receptors, which is the other neuron on the other side, is supposed to receive the chemical. That also starts to withdraw. Those mechanisms of receiving the drug, the machinery is damaged. But the worst of all is the transporting pump that recycles the chemical. Once it gets smashed, the whole system falls apart.
Yeah, sure. Can you tell people out there who might be using at the moment and struggling with addiction, what are the steps to get clean? What would you, how?
Okay, well, we need to talk about two separate issues. One side of the coin is building a reality that we actually like. If there is a reality that we're living in that we don't like and not impressed with, for example, if there's an emptiness here in the human heart, unfortunately addictions are going to jump in and take over. So in other words, addictions are a cheap substitute for what we're really looking for. Essentially, it's loving, meaningful relationships. So the only thing that makes sense this side of heaven is loving, meaningful relationships. Of course, possessions don't. I mean, we've all quickly figured that out. Look at Hollywood. Has all the money, success and power in the world. Statistically, they have the same divorce rates, the same drug and alcohol abuse, the same suicides. Of course, it doesn't work. And what does work? Loving, meaningful relationships. So that's the first part of the healing process that needs to be sold to people wanting to do recovery. They need to work on building a reality that's attractive so they're not then looking at the cheap substitutes. Now, the other side of the coin is addressing the underlying issues. Now, most of us have been exposed to underlying issues, whether it's fear, insecurity, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, all of these things that the person is exposed to through their life. If they're not resolved, it follows them around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is why people lapse. They make the effort to get clean. They might get either therapy, whether it's outpatient or even residential rehab. When they come out, if they haven't fully addressed those issues follow them around. Subconsciously, a person wants to avoid looking and talking about those things, so they stumble across something that makes them escape, which is the addiction. And of course, the brain quickly goes back to that, which it recognises, oh, that worked for me then, I'm going back to what I know works.
Sure.
Theoretically, it thinks it works, it doesn't, but that's what the brain thinks works, because that's what we did.
Sure. That was very much my experience. I relapsed after 4 years. I didn't deal with the issues. I sort of just did the whole grit my teeth and I'm not using it anymore, put that behind me. Yet, like you said, it was following me around and I wasn't aware that it was following me. I thought I was sweet, but as soon as I came across some challenges, some big challenges in my life, very quickly I was straight back in there. This time I've done it differently. I've really delved in and dealt with the issues. So, mate, can you tell us more, if people out there want to get involved and maybe become a facilitator or something, tell us more about the dual diagnosis course. How do they get involved with it?
Well, organisations like the Australian Anti-ICE campaign creates opportunities for people to come and help, whether it's working in administration or working in the organisation, helping in different areas, even presenting in schools for people that have a background and have become clean. There are different ways that people can get involved, but the point is the dual diagnosis training that we offer, called well, so the website is actually dualdiagnosistraining.com.au, which has been around for about 15 years. That's the training that I used to provide for the Department of Communities and other organisations, both government and non-government organisations in Australia. That's there to equip people and to train people to understand the relationship between alcohol and other drugs and mental health. Over the last 12 months, we've been working on getting this program actually online. So people in rural and remote locations who can't access the live training can then be able to log on to semi.online, and that's nearly ready. So part 1, which is chemically speaking 2, is a brief intervention. It's a 2-hour brief intervention to equip the average person out there to want to get involved and know how to do a brief intervention with someone using drugs. So anybody can do chemically speaking 2. It's going to be affordable and it's going to be available online within the next couple of weeks, and that's there to equip people. Now, the advanced training will also be available online in the next few months. Sure. And so what people experience live, they'll also be able to experience online. So that's coming soon. Awesome. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Nice. Mate, can you tell us more about how addiction affects not just the person, but how that ripples out into the community, the family members, all of that?
When we actually do public forums with the Australian Anti-Ice campaign, for example, and Andrea, I'm sure, has shared those kind of key issues before, but methamphetamine, ice, like all drugs, impact not only the individual that's using the substances, but all of their connections, including their family, their friends, the employers, work, school. Everybody is impacted by the harm associated with alcohol and other drugs. Now, we're specifically talking about ice tonight, so the harm that we see is actually multiplied because of the severe done to a person's, the damage is done to their mental health and their physical health. So this is why the Queensland Health Reports, for example, will demonstrate that we've had about a 10-fold increase in presentations, both in emergencies and hospital scenarios, as well as acute mental health. So that's a huge increase over the last 5 years.
Well, when you're dealing specifically with someone that struggled with ice addiction, what is their behaviour like when they're in that? What is your experience of their behaviour? What's sort of the main consequences of it?
It affects them on multiple levels. Apart from the physical injuries that are causing their body, once they actually upset their brain chemistry, it's going to significantly affect the behaviour. Now, it's probably the behaviour that we're worried about most, because it's not just the dopamine that's affected, that we've explained that. That's about the reward system. That's about how the brain gets hijacked. Okay, that's serious and that's a separate issue. But what about when the serotonin is depleted? Now, we need serotonin, by the way, not just to feel okay, but we need it to manage impulse. Now, if a person's using ice over a period of, say, 3 days, they actually deplete their serotonin levels. What happens then? They are not able to manage impulse, especially suicide and homicide. Then they become aggressive, and it can actually take 6 security guards to hold them down in hospital or in a shopping centre. So if a person is lacking impulse, that's bad enough. But what if a person is lacking impulse because their serotonin levels are depleted, plus on top of that, their dopamine levels are hitting through the roof and they're losing contact with reality? Because that's what happens, by the way. If dopamine is overstimulated, a person actually loses contact with reality. Now, we call it in the techno world a psychosis. But in the streets, they say, oh, this person's stuck in a trip. And it can last for hours, days, weeks, months or years. If it doesn't settle in 6 months, it turns into schizophrenia.
Yeah, wow.
Which is extremely hard to treat. Now, you can imagine a person losing contact with reality because they're overstimulated with methamphetamine. On top of that, they've depleted the serotonin levels. Is that a time bomb?
Sleep deprivation.
So we're wondering why a person drives through Bourke Street malls trying to run people over. We've had cases of people walking around with machetes on the Gold Coast. Why? They've lost contact with reality. They have no impulse control.
Yeah. 2 seconds, mate. We've had some lovely comments on the...
Yep.
Yeah, awesome.
So a comment about oxytocin.
Yeah.
And that's good to kind of comment on
too.
that. Yeah, thank you for your comment, Monique. In terms of dopamine, which is a feel-good pleasure, the dilemma with addictions such as methamphetamine, which is the ice, is that it stimulates the system around reward and desire, so it creates all yearning, all desire, but no reward and satisfaction. You see, the chemical that we make for fulfillment is called oxytocin. That's a separate reward system. That comes from human connection and bonding. This is what human beings experience. You know, when a mother's breastfeeding her child, when human beings are connecting to each other, after sexual experience between people. Oxytocin is a chemical that's released around human connection and bonding. That provides satisfaction. Addictions can't offer that. So whether it's gambling or whether it's substance abuse like methamphetamine, it's all yearning, all desire, all anticipation, but no reward.
And continually chasing it, they're never going to get that reward.
And they're left empty.
Yeah, cheap substitute
The hallmark of addiction is that.
Yeah, sure. Cheap substitute for love.
It's a cheap substitute
You
for
said
love.
in the course. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I've just seen the ICE helpline. Retro's put up. That's 0481 844 555. Big shout out to Retro too, mate. Hope you went well at the bike show. What else have we, George?
Just as a little commercial break, that family support line that we have, 0481 844 555, that's there to provide resources and support. Not just emotional support, but actual tools for families. We give people practical tools. We give them the cycle of addiction, the needs diagram, the stages of change. We actually provide the old Chemically Speaking video for free, so families are able to understand what happens with the addiction cycle and how people can move forward. Then, if people are not able to access a live support group, we actually give them an online support group to be part of. So if a family is looking for support, that number that you rang will give you a login to actually join us online, not just attending a live group.
Yeah, nice. Guys, lots of questions coming through. Use George while he's here, book of knowledge, as you can tell. So if you've got any questions, post them and we'll deal with them now.
I'm going to yell a question out, guys. We have Natasha's asked about detox and rehabs. Questions I get asked many times. Where do they start? Where do people start regarding detox and rehabs? So thanks, Natasha.
Look, this is where it becomes extremely complex, because when a person's battling with substance use, you have two options. One is an outpatient program, which involves things like counselling. The other is residential rehab. Now, the unfortunate thing for us in this industry is that the methamphetamine ice has such a dramatic effect on the human being that many people are not able to recover through an outpatient program. So we need more support and more backup with the residential programs. And they're, of course, stretched because the damage is so extreme to the person's functioning that statistically more people are going to need residential treatment in comparison to other drugs. So most people will be looking for services. They'll call the 1-800 number that each state has. So, for example, every state in Australia has an alcohol and drug information service. So when they call the Alcohol and Drug Information Service, they'll get the services that are closest to them. Now, of course, Australian Anti-Ice Campaign has a phone number as well. It's 07 5665 6063. Sorry, your hand's over the number. And so that's our number for direct inquiries to the Australian Anti-Ice Campaign. Now, of course, we have our website too, which is australianantiicecampaign.org.au, and we have a Get Help section there. Now, on the Get Help page, a person can find the relevant help for each state. So that will give you an idea of what's actually out there. So there are services in each state, naturally, but as you can imagine, the needs always exceed the resources. So what's our strategy? What's our plan to meet the needs that are growing in our community? Our goal with the Australian Anti-Ice Campaign and the partnership with the Optimal Health Group is to do what? Equip people in the community. So this is our philosophy, this is our strategy. If we can get each mum and dad out there to be able to do their brief intervention with Chemically Speaking too, then people who want to get involved in running family support groups and to do brief interventions will do their dual diagnosis training, and then they'll know how to be able to set up a recovery structure around this person called a tripod of support. Now, we use the word tripod deliberately because it takes 3 legs to keep that camera steady on the ground on its legs. Well, a person needs exactly the same. They need 3 legs working together. They need counselling, to work through those underlying issues we described before. They need to be attending meetings. Now, this is a place where a person can give and receive. So the good thing about meetings like the 12-step groups, like Narcotics Anonymous, is they immediately provide a community. Human beings cannot recover without community. If people are isolated and disconnected, they're gone. They cannot recover in isolation. They need to be part of a community. And that's the beauty about Narcotics Anonymous. As soon as you walk in there, you're loved, you're embraced. You're part of a community that accepts you and does not judge you. And that's the second leg that's absolutely essential. Now, the third leg is to get a sponsor. Anybody that's done our dual diagnosis training, we're asking them, please put up your hand. Offer yourself to be a buddy, to be a sponsor. Grab someone by the hand, walk with them. Yeah. So whilst we have the 12-step community who also offer sponsors, on top of that, we are asking everybody that's done their dual diagnosis training, either live or semi-online very soon, please make yourself available to be a sponsor.
Absolutely, because people are screaming out and reaching out, so we need people that can do brief interventions all the time. A couple of things, guys. Been asked, a few comments have come up about how to donate. Go to the Australian Anti-Ice Campaign's website, which George mentioned, australianiantiicecampaign.org.au, and just click on Join the Army, and you can follow the steps there. One-time donations or monthly donations, you can... Basically, it works out to be $2 a child, guys, and that's getting the AAIC presenters out there and into the schools to educate our kids. We are not funded, we're not funded, so your help really does count, guys. This is an issue that we need to deal with. Only 2% of people get clean off this drug. 27 youth a day picking it up. It really is an issue. We've got another question there. Have you got that, George? Do you believe in the detox centres to help, I think it says detox off the drugs?
Yeah, we probably didn't finish explaining that earlier on, that there are 2 steps to the recovery process. The first is the immediate, which is the detox. The person's body must be cleaned from the impact and effect of the chemicals. Otherwise, how are they going to think? How are they going to function? That's only the first step, and it takes 2 weeks just to get the person functioning and thinking again. Now, once a person has done that, then they can set up the tripod of support and or residential rehab. Yeah. So, in other words, detox can be valuable to help a person remove themselves from a dangerous situation and begin planning treatment and recovery. So detox is not treatment, it's a necessary step towards treatment, because if the person's body's not clean from the addiction, how are they even going to think and function and make decisions? Yeah. So yes, in other words, detox is part of that step forward.
Sure. You're mentioning a tripod, which I know personally is so important, because there's often a gap between the detox and the rehab, because the services are out so stretched. So the tripod is crucial in that gap, because I know a lot of people that get lost in that gap between detox and rehab. They detox, they get out. If they don't have a buddy or this tripod system that you're talking about, they just go back to their old ways, which is really sad. So really crucial to get that tripod system happening, guys. And contact AAIC, guys, if you have been through detox and there's a bit of a wait period to get into rehab. Contact AAIC. We can set up a buddy for you and the tripod system that you've talked about.
Yeah, the tripod of support is necessary to help a person stay alive, to get it into treatment, but believe it or not, it's just as important after treatment. So when a person has done either outpatient counselling, but especially when they've done residential rehab, we really encourage them to set up a tripod where they're still getting counselling after rehab and having a buddy sponsor walking with them and attending meetings. Because the meetings is not just to receive, it's to give as well. And a lot of people forget that 12th step. The 12th step is about grabbing someone by the hand when you've gotten clean and you've become stable and walking along with someone else. It's about giving back. It's not just about receiving. It's a necessary part of the healing process where a person becomes a sponsor.
Yeah, that's the joy in it, is afterwards is giving back, really, isn't it?
Have I got time for a quick commercial break?
Please. If there's anything else you want to say, go for it.
I just wanted to sort of add a bit of a commercial break. The reason why being a sponsor is so important if you've come out of the drug scene It's part of your healing to help you grow into your full capacity as a human being, and we call that unconditional love. So if you're wanting to understand spirituality, we're not talking about organised religion here. Spirituality, the two most important aspects of spirituality is one, learning unconditional love, because that's what separates us from the animals, and number two, being able to find meaning and purpose to life. Giving of yourself unconditionally helps you to grow in those two important aspects of spirituality. So our longer term goals is to encourage everybody that's done the dual diagnosis training to put up their hand and be available, be a sponsor. In what we'd like to do in the long term is to see 2 people in every club, association, sporting club trained through the dual diagnosis training to be able to intervene. So if there's a problem in a club, if there's a problem at work, instead of just getting rid of them, do a brief intervention. So whether it's a coach or an employer or a supervisor, if they've done their brief intervention training, we give an opportunity in that setting to reach out and help the person. So that's our goal, is to see 2 people in every club, association and workplace trained.
So on that note, guys, if you feel called to help, if you would like to help, if you think this is an issue that we need looked at, get on the website and check out the dual diagnosis course, because to be able to facilitate brief interventions is a service beyond measure, and we really need all the help that we can get with it. Is there anything else, George? Millions of people are going to see this, mate.
Oh, that's cool. I just want to say that everybody's out there doing something. The government is having initiatives doing things. Many non-profit organisations are doing things. Everyone's trying to get involved and help. So my message to everybody listening is all hands on deck. Okay? So please understand, not one entity is going to be able to do this. We all have to do this together. And it's extremely important that everybody picks up the phone and calls their principals, student welfare coordinators, student counsellors, pick up the phone, talk to your schools and say, we need specialist education for our students. The alcohol and drug programs that schools deliver are important. They are a foundation and they must be done. But the school policies around the federal government is that they invite specialist services like ourselves to come in on top of that current service and deliver specialist intervention. And this is what I'm asking you to do. We need all hands on deck. Without education, people are constantly going to be falling off the cliff. No matter how many services we have down here, we're never going to keep up. We've got to get to the top of the cliff. We've got to stop people falling off. Now, I understand that even students, many of them will experiment, particularly when they've got underlying issues driving them, like fear and insecurity and family break. We get all that. But many have the resources that are functioning well to say, no, I'm not putting sulfuric acid and hydrochloric acid in my veins. Get that shit out of my face. How are they going to say that if they don't even know what's in it? And this is why specialist education is necessary. So please, get AAC into your schools. These are your kids. It's all hands on deck. We all need to take responsibility for creating sustainable solutions in our community. We will do our part, but it's up to you as people out there. These are your children. Get on the phone, get into your schools and help us get in there. Is that okay? So everybody's doing their part. So sustainable solutions is our strategy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You can make a difference, guys, like George said, all hands on deck. Make the call. AIC have an amazing workshop and educational program. So that's nearly it. Is there anything else, guys?
Are there any other concerns or questions that have been presented to us?
Mark has a question, and he's typed that in, but he hasn't typed the question. So Mark, if you're out there, you have a question, please type it in so the guys can answer it for you. If you have any questions out there, guys, now's the time to ask it. There's nobody more equipped that mentors us and that knows more about this subject than George. We are privileged and honoured to have him here today, and he's outreaching to you to help anybody that needs help. So please ask away if you have any questions.
Really important, guys, to educate our kids. I just can't stress that much. That's why I'm here. Prevention is the key. We need to get in there early, and this drug is so available.
Isn't it the same principle, though, in all health-related areas? Prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been saying that for years, and it's even more so with this particular substance because of the nature of addiction. Now, some of you may have heard A drug like cannabis, for example, about a third of the adult population has experimented or tried cannabis. Now, in terms of people using it frequently and daily, it's about roughly 10% of the adult population. So what's the strike rate? Roughly about a 30% addiction rate. With methamphetamine, it's twice that. It averages around 60 to 66%. So that is a huge concern. What happens with these people when they become addicted? What services are they going to pick up the pieces? The systems are imploding, whether it's health or whether it's probation and parole. I mean, we're having up to 50 to 70% of breaches around methamphetamine. What are we going to do with these people? If we can't keep them on probation and parole, where do they go? In the jails? The jails are full. So as you can see, prevention is going to be able to break the back of this growing problem. Interventions are not going to fix this. Without prevention, we're screwed.
So pick up the phone, guys. Call the principal of your child's school. You can make a difference, and you can, if you speak up and speak out, we've got and tell people about this educational program. We can actually make a difference. Can we see the rest of the question? Why does ice seem harder at the moment?
Any other drug.
What do you mean harder?
Harder to get off.
Harder to get off. Yeah. What's the difference between, say, the difference between coming off an opiate and amphetamine?
Okay, so all drugs, when they become addictive, there is a process of recovery. And if those neurotransmitters, the chemicals that we make for our moods and emotions, if they have been disrupted because the machinery has been damaged, it could take anywhere from 18 months to 3 years to completely rebuild that. Now, what happens to that person when they're feeling shit for the next 18 months? Does that not present with a higher risk factor of lapsing if you're feeling miserable, if you're feeling unhappy? If your brain chemistry is depleted and your machinery has been damaged, what happens to the recovery process? A person is higher at risk of lapsing. So as you can see, these are all important, unique factors to methamphetamine. These are problems for all drugs, but particularly the methamphetamine because of how strongly it hijacks and deceives the person and then damages the neurotransmitters and the production to get those neurotransmitters replenished. It can take 18 months. That person is now at risk for 18 months. Everybody wants to feel okay.
Yeah. A lot of people I speak to, addicts, the first, they ask, why do you use? Well, I want to feel good. That's the first thing they sort of say, a lot of them.
Well, down the track, it's not even feeling good. I just want to feel normal again.
Yeah, eventually.
And I don't even feel normal because my brain chemistry has been depleted. So I need to use just to get out of bed, let alone, feel okay. That was long gone.
Yeah.
So this is our dilemma.
Awesome to have you, man. Such a book of knowledge. We could speak for hours. Like, seriously, that's awesome. I'm sure everybody has gained knowledge from this session with George. And he does provide training, guys, within all of this. So if you would like to see more of George and learn about some of this stuff, check out the dual diagnosis website, which you can get through ARC.
Probably it's worth mentioning too, if you do log on to dualdiagnosistraining.com.au, what you will see there is a family support page as well that explains our approach around resourcing and helping families. You'll also see a page there called Community Development Response to Ice and Other Drugs. That in English tries to explain the partnership with the Australian Anti-Ice Campaign focusing on prevention and the Optimal Health Group providing training and resources. So that partnership is an example of respect and love and trust between two organisations that have come together to work in a spirit of cooperation and love to be part of this sustainable solution that we're offering communities. So we are demonstrating partnership and love and trust and respect as organisations working together. Yeah. So you can read about that, in other words.
Awesome to have Optimal Health on board. Next week, guys, thanks, George. Awesome,
it's a
man.
pleasure,
Seriously awesome, bro. We got so much going on. That was really cool. I liked that so much. So we got ARCs going down to Melbourne next week, I believe. There's a few things happening down there. Hopefully we can pull in some more AFL stars while we're down there to do a shout out. I'm off to the mines where we're starting to do some workshops in the mines, which is very exciting. We know it's a big problem in the mines, so getting out there and educating the boys a little bit deeper on the drug and addiction. I'm looking forward to that. And next week, got another addict who has pushed the envelope in his addiction. He has been very deep in the addiction and has been involved very heavily with dealing and stuff like that. So a blessing to have him on board. Can't wait for that. Is there anything else? Nah? Lots of love, guys. That was awesome. Episode 4, 5.
Do you have any questions?
If there's any questions, post them, guys. We'll get through to them during the week. Check dual diagnosis out. And yeah, lots of love, guys.
Thanks for tuning in.
Awesome.
And thanks for getting involved. By tuning in, you're getting involved. Thank you.
Yeah, share, guys. Share this. The more that know about it, the better. All hands on deck, like we said.
All hands on deck.
And not even once. That's our message.
Notevenonce.com.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.